All right, my name is Aaron Rhodes, and you're listening to the Shuttlecock podcast. We're sponsored by the Vinyl Underground at Seventh Heaven, offering new and used vinyl at 76 and Troost in Kansas City, Missouri. This week on the show, we have Collin and Kyle Rausch from Shy Boys. How you guys doing?
Pretty good.
Glad to be here.
Awesome, glad to have you. But yeah, you guys have the new album on Polyvinyl out now called Bell House.
That's right.
Which is all kind of based around your times at a house on Bell Street in like West Plaza area, and just like, and it, it was a few years in the making, so like I don't know, I just find it kind of like interesting, like right off the bat, and the fact that like it, like you were working on it for such a long time, but it does like boil down to like 22 minutes of just like boom,
yeah,
you got it right there.
Yeah, it's a little underwhelming to like have a 4.5 year time difference between our first record and this one, and then like here's our big release, and it's like shorter than the first record, which is
how long is the first
record is like 25, I think 26 minutes,
something like that.
You're like, we can do better here.
Yeah.
Let's you cut some fat.
Yeah,
that's right.
But no, yeah, I was planning on asking that later, but what was like, yeah, do you end up with like a lot of like B-sides and like cut material and stuff, or are you like usually like pretty succinct like in the songwriting process?
I think it's pretty succinct. On this one, we ended up cutting a track, which is a first for us. But by cutting a track, it only means that we shaved off like 2 minutes off that run time, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But I agonize, I guess you could say, over songwriting and stuff, or just making sure that every piece is perfect or something. So there isn't a lot of throwaway, We'll work and rework a song until it feels right. And then when we get into the studio, it could change, in that moment.
And like, I guess I kind of wonder too, like on the first album too, they're like most of the songs were like around the 2 minute mark. So what do you think makes you guys end up writing like such short tracks like in the first place? Is it like stuff you might have listened to, like been influenced by like when you're younger, or like?
Definitely influences. Yeah. I think most of the members, Connor and Collin and I, we all grew up on like pop music in general, but oldies, and I think that's a huge part of it, but also like I don't think the general audience has an ear for a 5-minute track these days. So I think there's maybe a part of that as well, but we just like pop songs, and they're usually to the point. So
also, there's like 3 good ideas per song, and there's not much more than that. And instead of just like hitting them over the head over and over again with these 3 ideas, like we'll present them, and then that'll be the end of the song, and there's no need to really like expand on it. I don't feel like, I don't know. My attention span is pretty short for songs. Like I didn't want one of those records where you like put it on while you work in your design job and zone out for 45 minutes, Like I wanted it to be an active listen, but it seems like the response has been like, well, why aren't the songs longer? So I kind of miscalculated, I guess, what people's expectations were. So it's backfired a little bit, but I still, prefer those shorter tracks.
No, yeah, like, because, yeah, when you think about, like, any, like, classic, like, 50s through 70s, like, pop song, like, you have to fit it on that 45, and, like, that's,
right.
Like, what you kind of deal in. And also, like, I think it's much better to, like, any, like, fan of, like, punk music can tell you, like, it's better to leave people wanting a little more than, like, wear them out, like you were saying.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, there's nothing worse than going to a show and then, like, being really into a band for 15 minutes, and then they play another half an hour, and then by the end you end up hating that band or hating that set, when really if they just gotten off the stage 5 minutes later, it would have been the best show you've seen in a while,
Oh, yeah, it's funny. I ended up talking about that with like the guys in Bummer, because they just released their LP like a couple days ago too, and that was like part of their thing. We were talking about their release show, and they're like, no, yeah, we're not playing more than 25 minutes. That'd be fucked up.
Yeah.
And they're also talking about how they recorded at West End too, like you guys worked on the Bell House LP there. So that was kind of a cool little thing I hadn't even realized yet.
Yeah, West End's a really good spot. I guess they worked with Justin Mantooth. And Mantooth was around kind of for our stuff, but we brought in a buddy of ours, Mike Nolte, who'd been in bands in the area, in the past, and he lives in Portland now, but we brought him out to kind of come back and do the record, and he's got an awesome ear, and he used to work at West End, so he knows the space really well and what its assets are. It's a good spot.
And it wasn't too far from like the actual house too, right?
Like around the corner. Bell Street's like 1 block east of State Line, and so it's just kind of like up and around the corner. It's just right there.
Was it a situation where you guys would just like kind of end up in the studio like last minute, or was it like a pretty planned out like set time you had to do it?
It was planned out.
Yeah.
We still had to pay, for the use of the studio and schedule a time to be there and stuff. And Mike flew in from Portland, so we were kind of working up towards like a weekend, and then we tried to cram all of it into like 3 days. And so yeah, most of the album is like a band playing in a room, and then we would like sing the vocal parts, later down the line, or maybe do a couple overdubs, stuff like that.
Was it like stressful at all to like finally be entering a studio after like 4 years of like writing and stuff? Like, oh, do we have the right songs? Do we have like all this figured out right?
Well, we didn't know. Like, we didn't have plans to go in the studio, but Mike, the guy who recorded us, like messaged us, say, hey, I'm gonna be in town like in a month. Let's record a record. And we're like, cool. So we scrambled that extra month and like probably finished the last 25% of the record in that month, and then just got in the studio, not really ready, but being open to what that time would give us. And I think it helped because it made a 4.5 year long gestating record feel like an immediate thing, because we weren't even prepared at that point by the time we got into the studio. And it meant we were open to like some, I don't know, moments. Like they had a piano in there, which we never had access to, and so there's piano on the album, and there's like this 12-string acoustic in the studio that we're like, hey, let's throw that on. It ended up changing the complexion of the record totally, just being in that space.
Nice. No, yeah, and that the instruments like ended up being in the, like you were saying, they just happened to be
like
there.
we hadn't used or even thought about any of those things before we went in there, and they just happened to be laying around. And
is it like a harpsichord that's on one track, or like what's the kind of like on Evil Sin?
Yeah,
I
Evil
think?
Sin. I think it's a synthesizer with like a pseudo setting of a harpsichord, but then the part was also doubled by a piano, if I remember correctly. So it feels a little bit more organic, and they're kind of tucked right together, so it's pretty hard to decipher.
There's just like this classic 80s, 90s keyboard called a Yamaha DX7, and my parents just had this, just the brain of a DX7 outside the keyboard part, and so we brought that in, and the harpsichord is like this super synthetic, cheesy sound, that's great to me. I love the sound of it, but it doesn't sound like a harpsichord. But by adding the piano to it, it kind of made it feel like an organic instrument again.
Nice. Oh yeah, and you were saying you finished the last 25% of the album in that month, and I'm like, oh wow, the last 5 minutes of the album. So I don't want to keep hammering that, but
it's hard.
I
mean, we work on a track for a really long time. Like Tragic Loss was a totally different song when we first started it, and it was like in drop B or something like that, and like really heavy and
we were
dark.
Like super into the Burial Teens. Remember that band? Had Bad Girl Carrie on.
Oh yeah, with Dan and everyone. Yeah.
Dan. And we just thought they were great.
Yeah.
And So I was like, we're gonna do a punk rock song, you know. And so we, you know, dropped it down to B, and it's like this heavy riffage thing right at the top, and then it definitely
We
didn't hit
chickened out
Yeah,
in
we
the
chickened
end,
out.
yeah.
It was a good move to make to back off of that.
Be interested in hearing a demo of that if that's anywhere out there.
Yeah, I can send it to you.
exists.
Yeah, maybe it'll like because you guys did like kind of a B-side comp or like a 7-inch that you put out through like a Japanese label like a year or
Oh
two
no,
ago?
that's Ross. Oh no,
We did a British
it. Yeah,
release.
Yeah,
Oh,
It
British
was
release.
from
Okay.
England, yeah.
Tight.
This guy has his own boutique label where he just hits up bands. It's like, hey, can I put your music on a 45 and then or 10-inch? Is it 45?
45. Yeah.
And put it out for no cost to you and no money to you. And we were like, yeah, okay, cool. So he puts together this crazy 45, and we were able to fit like 5 or 6 tracks on a 45 because they're so short. But he like packaged it with a poster and like temporary tattoos and stickers and like little notes and confetti and things. It's a really cool package.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to track one of those down at some point. But no, yeah, and you also mentioned that you were paying for the studio time like out of pocket. Like, at what point in the process did Polyvinyl come along? Like, was that after they had like agreed to do the record?
No, we had the album done and maybe even mastered by the time Polyvinyl heard it, or like at least mixed. I think that it's very rare to get signed by a label without having an album finished. Like, if you're already well established and the label knows that they'll profit off of you, then yeah, for sure. But I mean, we were living in the DIY world the whole time up until a few months ago, and so we had the album finished and totally done, and then we like had like friends of friends of friends made it over to them, and they liked it, and that's kind of like when the conversation started. Same thing with our manager. We were playing some shows with Mild High Club, and he also manages them, and we were like doing an opening slot for some shows with them, and he's like, hey, do you have any like music, like you're working on? I was like, well, matter of fact, we got an album done, and we sent it to him, and he really liked it, and it was kind of like, from there, everything really started to change, because he's well established in like the music game, and kind of knows what to do and how and when to do it, which is really clutch, because we don't know anything about that stuff really. But up to then, like, we just been making music and booking shows wherever we can get them booked, just like everybody else. So
Was that becoming like a stressful process as well, like having the album finished and like not knowing where it's gonna go?
No, I mean, we had... don't want to call High Dive like a plan B, but we had always just planned on releasing it on High Dive Records, the label we put it out, our first record with, and that would have been great, because we did pretty well for our expectations on our first record, and we love Jeff, and I've had a lot of great friends on High Dive, and that was going to be awesome, and just do it that way, and we never imagined, even at the beginning, that Shy Boys was going to be anything more than just, playing in houses or, I don't know, playing at the Brick or something for the rest of our lives. But here we are, with the label and stuff. It's just been kind of a strange thing, I guess.
Oh yeah, and there was one more thing I wanted to ask about, like, the actual recording and everything. Like, there was also those, like, on Miracle Grow and Basement, and I think Champion, there's like the clapping and the snaps and like the kind of organic percussion and stuff. Like, was that something you had thought about and planned on incorporating, or was it like kind of like through the process of like demoing that you realized you wanted to keep that stuff on there?
I think a lot of the not being drums on those songs or whatever is because I just didn't feel like the songs, I don't know, like, I think that gives the songs a bit more of like an individual identity. To like do a full band arrangement on something like Miracle Grow or Champion, it just kind of seemed like we were muddying the waters with everything else. And there's also the idea to do an a cappella track on the album, like well in advance of having an a cappella track written. So I think it was just like, yeah, we can do drums here and it'd probably sound fine, but then it's just like, here's another pop song with, we're just trying to do something different to give the songs an identity.
Mm. Oh yeah, it's kind of like a nice way to like highlight the melodies and like the vocals and everything too.
Right. Yeah.
So.
It makes it a drag though when it comes to live shows because we're for the release show we had a couple weeks ago. We always start a set with Miracle Grow, but a big part of that are these like quarter note claps that go through it to keep the song moving. And we didn't know like if we should just sing it without the claps like we normally do. And then somebody brought up, well, maybe we should just like start clapping and everybody else will start clapping. And then we thought like, trying to get the crowd go would just be so embarrassing and ridiculous. So those types of moments, like we can't recreate the hand claps on stage because it just looks so goofy. So it makes playing and performing those tracks kind of difficult.
But if you want my input, I would love to see it. So if that's any encouragement, I would have a
Next
lot
time
of
we
fun.
see you out in front,
That's good.
claps are coming your way.
No, but to counter that, I do typically like really hate when crowds end up clapping for like songs, especially like because they inevitably like 9 times out of 10 they mess up whatever rhythm is there, and you're like, oh man, that didn't need to happen.
We actually had that happen. I think it was at our show in New York, and there was someone there who was just wasted and really excited and clapping, but not even remotely on the beat, and so it was like really hard to stay with the songs. It's just all over the place.
Did you end up giving him a little nudge or anything come of that?
No, I loved it.
was
It's like
great.
they're having fun.
Like whenever I would get in that show particularly, whenever I was like in a bad mood, I'd just kind of like turn to that guy and he's like, and it's okay, this is fun still.
That's nice. But yeah, another thing I wanted to ask about is like on the single art for Life is Peachy and in the Evil Sin video, you guys are featured as the choir, and like you did grow up doing church choir stuff. So I was just kind of curious, like how long like was that period of like singing in church, and like was it like a really enjoyable thing, or like was it just simply like part of what you guys did?
We our mom was a music director at a Baptist church in Blue Springs, and we were conscripted at an early age to be a part of the music there. And it was fun when we were starting because it gave us a chance to play music and in front of people and with each other, but it got to be a drag really quick, and it became a thing where even into early high school we were still doing it, but it was to support our mother. Really, it wasn't like a participating in the services kind of thing. But the weird church thing is a huge part of Kyle and I's upbringing, and a big part of the other guys' upbringing as well.
I imagine there's a lot of people that have a similar story where they get into music because of church, because they always need musicians and they're usually willing to let some kid, whatever.
It's strange because I think, and maybe I'm completely off base here, but especially in the underground DIY scene or whatever, like there has to be people who've spent time growing up in a church, but nobody ever talks about it. Like, and they don't, and we just like acknowledge the fact that it was a big part of our upbringing. It's not part of our lives anymore, but it shaped us definitely on how we approach music and how we hear melodies and harmonies and song structure and things like that. And it was cool because, like I said, it gave us an outlet, especially for Kyle and I. And I've been playing with him in an organized setting since I was 12, So, for that reason, it was cool. But now we're just kind of like seeing it from a different perspective, and sort of the strange rituals and the hypocrisy and some of the things that, I don't know, we don't like anymore.
Yeah. It's, I mean, we had a loving upbringing, so it's kind of hard to diss, even though we could all day. But I think there's a lot of stuff that, like, if you are in it as the way we were and like as deep as we are, it's definitely a process to get out, and basically letting a lot of people down, and they think you're going to hell and that kind of stuff. So maybe it's even like some sort of a therapeutic thing or something like that.
It is. I mean, hanging out with Connor especially, and the other guys to a degree, like we will kind of talk about how the crazy things that we were sort of peer pressured into doing. Like, I don't know if you ever had any church experience, but sort of the more charismatic moments where people will be in a worship service, and at Connor's church people would start speaking in tongues and like seizing and stuff, and when we were more reserved Baptists, but there's definitely raising hands and getting on your knees, and kind of like that subservient wailing, and
all of a sudden the music gets quiet and it's really delicate and pretty. It's just weird because you're like kind of directing people's spiritual moment, if you will, and then you start rocking again and people are just like, oh, praise Jesus. And what can you say?
But we'll end up we got along real well with Connor at the beginning because we shared those experiences with each other, like those memories, and it's like, well, you felt guilty about not feeling the Spirit in that moment. Like, that's great. I felt guilty too because I didn't feel shit, And so we need to talk about how Connor would feign being in the Spirit, and I remember on a couple occasions I'd go like this, just so I didn't feel left out of the experience, even though I wasn't feeling any of it. Yeah. It's just this really strange level of guilt that I still carry, that I'm not leading this spiritual life that we work out together.
Yeah, and it's a cocoon of an existence for sure. Like, when we were kids, there really wasn't much internet for the public at that time, and we didn't have cable or anything, so it was just a very small world that we lived in, and it took a long time to figure out that maybe this little small world's not where it's at. And that's a long process to, like I said, to get out of that thought. But we learned a lot about music in that time, so that's cool.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and no, you'd mentioned that I think that is a really interesting point, that so many people, especially in the Midwest,
right,
grow up in this environment, and sure, a lot of people come out hating it and not wanting to discuss it, but I think you're right in the fact that to ignore something that was such a pivotal or formative thing in your life, in your art, is kind of strange. I'm surprised that I don't see more Midwestern artists at least acknowledging or nodding to their church experiences and everything.
And we're not acknowledging as in a way to lift up that experience.
No, yeah.
We're acknowledging in a ways hey, we all went through this. A lot of us in the Midwest went through this experience. Let's talk about it, and talk about how it's shaped us and how we can address it in a healthy way, I guess.
No, yeah, and so yeah, you guys didn't grow up singing together and doing the whole church thing, but it's funny. I read Kevin Morby's little written piece for the album, and he talks about the blood harmony, and how that's kind of an interesting thing. So do you guys feel you have a heightened ability to harmonize and play off each other when you're singing or playing?
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, When I think of like blood harmonies and the way that Morby's describing, I'm thinking of like those folk or country folk people who like can just really lock it in and create this really tight knit thing. And I think that we struggle with it. You know, it's not like a natural thing that just kind of happens when we open our mouths. It was kind of nice of him to equate us with that. But I think there is some sort of like bond as far as just like physically our voices are similar because we're brothers, you know, so the way we sing has like same like tonal qualities that, and maybe because of that they blend together a little bit better than just singing with strangers. But I don't know that it's, you know, as holy as something like, you know, blood harmonies in a folk setting, you know.
And another thing I thought was interesting in his piece was the, I don't know, like he opened it talking about how being a band in the Midwest in 2018 is a sacred thing. And I was just kind of curious, like, what you guys thought about that sentiment.
I mean, I think so, in a way. I mean, it's the music and art world is definitely still dominated by the coastal, you know, big players or whatever. And I think he's just kind of alluding to, you know, like, hey, there is cool stuff here and it's okay to like this, you know.
And also, you know, especially in like the indie scene or whatever it is, most bands nowadays are like one guy who hires on players to back him up his project, you know, or her project or whatever, and it's not as tight knit or of a collaborative experience anymore with a lot of bands. Whereas like I think like I'll bring a song, but the song doesn't become a Shy Boys thing until, you know, everybody gets a piece of it, you know. And I think that experience, that collaborative experience, is kind of rare for any band, let alone where they are from. But also, you know, being on the coast or being in the Midwest is, I don't know, we'll roll into a town on the coast and they'll just be shocked that we're from Kansas City, like that anybody is coming in from Kansas City playing music, and you see them like they're like taken aback, like they like step back and look you over, you know, it's like their assessment wasn't, you know, jiving with what they just heard. And I remember I talked to one dipshit who like asked sincerely if we took horses to where we needed to go, like being from Kansas City, you know, like, well, do you guys just like take a horse to like the city, you know? And I just couldn't believe it. And I don't think they're drunk or anything. I think they're just morons. And I don't know, there's still that sort of like bumpkin persona that gets put on us.
Yeah.
You know, we're kind of freak shows to people on the coast sometimes.
I will say though, like there's bad music everywhere, and the ratio of good to bad doesn't really change from city to city. There's just way more bands in some, you know, in LA or whatever, but there's tons of terrible bands too. And I think that like people in the Midwest should definitely not like be intimidated or something like that, because all you got to do is like put in the effort and you'll get better. And we've toured a bunch at this point and played with a ton of bands, and a lot of them aren't that good. But there's also, I mean, sometimes you see something and you're like, this is incredible, and you know, it's inspiring. But I think that like bands around Kansas City are just as good as bands anywhere else, and they just need to get out of town and go travel.
Oh yeah, I think it really is just at the end of the day the fact that like most of the major labels and like media outlets are in like the major cities on the coasts,
right.
And you know, it's just like, yeah, there are just as many good bands in any city you go to, but it's just the matter of getting the word out there.
Right. And I mean, it seems like most of the industry is still like a handshake insider sort of deal. Like a booking agent or a label's probably going to sign the band that they can go see that's 10 minutes down the street, as opposed to a band that's 2,000 miles away. And it's like, well, they're both pretty decent, and I can't really tell which one's better than the other, so we'll just sign the band that's right there.
And in fact, like, when we were in the process of shopping Bell House, you know, our manager was like, hey, man, you need to record the set and like on video so I can send it out, because nobody's going to fly to Kansas City to see you guys play, you know. And so we just had to take those extra steps just to get noticed, you know, by anybody outside the city. Yeah. And people in the city still don't give a fuck about us, so, you know, it's...
Yeah. But I'm guessing though that at least like the fact that you can record the whole set and like the kind of democratizing power of the internet to like a certain extent can help push like bands from smaller cities at this point. But like you've said, like it definitely is still like a big city thing in a lot of scenes.
And there's a trade-off because the internet has helped a lot of people gain access to millions of other people, there's also so many bands and artists that are like vying for attention. And maybe, I mean, it seems like the music industry is more corporatized now than at any time before. Like, you know, streaming services hold all the power. And while it's great that people listen to it, you know, there's basically no way to make money from the music itself. It's all about like merchandise or touring.
Yeah. No, yeah, and even like I read this crazy article that was talking about like all of the like Spotify playlists and how like all these like big corporations like car companies and everyone has like these sponsored playlists, but like even if like a few more people listen to your song that is on there, like they don't have to ask to put your song on there, and you don't make money from the company to have your song on there. So like even
you just get the regular Spotify streaming amount that you would get for any play. Yeah.
So like the way it's being like kind of homogenized and like they're kind of kicking out the legs to a lot of this stuff is like kind of a weird and like bad and still interesting
I never
thing.
really thought about that. So like Honda wants to put together a playlist.
Yeah.
You know, and they're using all of these bands to basically promote their product for free. Which is pretty whack.
Yeah.
But Honda,
you need a
I'd
song
love to
for
be
a
on your
commercial?
playlist.
Yeah. But another thing I wanted to ask about was all of the art that goes around the new album. I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce it right. The cover is by Kit Landwehr. Landwehr? Yeah. No, yeah, and she's from Kansas City, or went to the Art Institute at least. Yeah. No, yeah, and I think it matched up well too, like the kind of colorful, playful, like kind of psychedelia on it matched up cool with the Evil Sin video and like kind of the hazy feeling on that, and like also like the colorful Shy Boys kind of sculpture lettering that you brought to the show too.
Yeah.
It's I guess I don't know really what to say about that. I mean, Kit's artwork was, we approached her because we really liked her style, and you know, we saw that there could potentially be some crossover as far as like aesthetic ideas go. She turned out this incredible piece, you know, with what seemed to be practically no effort. I mean, it was a lot of effort, I'm sure, but it was just, you know, we've had so many compliments on that artwork, and it's all because of Kit. And we've been really lucky. Well, in the past, like, I've had to do all the artwork, and I hate doing it just because it's an extra level of stress that I don't want to deal with. And usually there are a lot of people who are a lot better than me. And so I think especially with Bell House, there was more of like, okay, we're going to have somebody do the artwork. And then our bandmate Kyle Little collaborated with Alec Nichols to do...
Nicholas, I think, yeah.
To do the Evil Sin video. You know, it's just bringing people that you know and care about into the collaborative space, to make something better than that we could have done ourselves this time around. And I think it's really worked out, especially with the artwork and the video. And Nika Wynn's done some T-shirt artwork for us, and Kelsey Borch did a great Rizzo poster for us, and just trying to bring in artists we like and want to collaborate with.
Oh yeah, and so did you do the first album's cover art?
That was
Gatlin.
Yeah.
A friend of ours, Gatlin, he doesn't live here now, but he painted the portrait that's the album cover, and we just we had him paint a specific photo, I think, and then we just took a photograph of that and used it for the cover artwork.
Yeah, I was interested where that image came from, or what that was really supposed to be of. Was it kind of like a ghost thing, or
It's I can't remember the girl's name. It's this old model basically from the 60s, and at the time we were just really into that surf vibe, and we just thought this photograph just totally embodied that. She kind of had this slacker stoner look on her face, and but so we just wanted Gatlin to paint this portrait based on this photograph, and it was awesome, but it was green, and it was kind of wonky a little bit. It's kind of got this real toothy mouth, and it's sort of not a perfect likeness, which really added, I think, a lot to the vibe, because that first record was especially ramshackle and not exactly a perfect idea of what Shy Boys could be. We've just been lucky to just work with so many awesome people like that who've been able to take the music and interpret it and find something special in it that we wouldn't have found ourselves.
And so I read David Hudnall's article in the pitch, the cover story you guys had, and I thought it was really funny. The tour stop it was at a botanical garden in Idaho.
Yeah, Boise.
Yeah, and there was a wine tasting booth, an AARP booth, and old couples dancing.
Yeah.
Did you know what you were getting into when you went to that gig, or I'm just curious about how that happened.
It was going to be an outdoor thing in a botanical gardens, and that was about it. I didn't think there were going to be. First of all, I didn't think there was going to be anybody there at all, but there was 100.
Hundreds.
Yeah, a whole bunch of people, but mostly over the age of 55, which we didn't expect at all. And so there was they're all lounging in their super nice lawn chairs, nice cloth backed wide, with cup holders, and just kind of enjoying each other's company and ignoring us completely, until we decided to pull out these two covers from a guy named Gary Lewis, who had hits in the early 60s, early mid 60s, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, and there's 10 old people just twisting in front of the stage and doing just really getting down. And as soon as we switched back to original material, they all sat down and disappeared. And it's a really strange event.
I had fun though.
Oh cool. Yeah, it was a blast. And we played with another band who was a lot of fun, really good, and they were kind of taken aback by the experience as well. So, but the wine tasting booth was pretty funny. I didn't get any, but the other guys evidently got fairly ripped on wine right before we played, and they want us to give them shout outs from the stage, and I think one guy was hitting on Ross pretty hard, plying him with, hey, you want another glass of wine? Hey, I want another glass of wine. Do you want this bottle? It was a really strange experience, but we've had a lot worse gigs than playing in front of a few hundred people and getting paid to do it.
But anything stranger than that?
Well,
yeah, I'm sure, plenty. But seems like most of our strange moments on tour revolve around times not during the set, and it's like where we end up staying, just stuff like that, or
I'm not gonna name the city for fear we ever have to go back, but we played 2 shows back to back in this Rust Belt state. And the first one was at a bar where it was us, the other band, and the bartender the whole night. And it was really strange, and the other band sucked really bad. And we didn't get paid for that show. So we drove to the next town and ended up playing at a pizza place's open mic night. And we didn't know, like, we were on our way to that city talking to the guy who was hooking us up with the show. And so, like, what's the detail? What's going on with this thing? It's like, oh, just show up, it'll be fine. And we played after this father-daughter duo doing, like, Of Monsters and Men covers. And then we go on and play our set. And we ended up eating more pizza than we got paid to do the set. So we ended up paying them to play at the open mic night at the pizza place.
Oh, man, I was going to at least be like, yeah, did you get the pizza free or something?
No,
That's terrible.
We paid for the pizza, definitely in the beer.
Well, another time in the same state, as a matter of fact, we played at a place called, this might give it, whatever, Now That's Class, which is like a pretty iconic, like, punk hardcore venue. And there was like it was a 2-band bill, and there was an artist before us, and it was like this kind of avant-garde violin thing where it like sort of intertwined like self-violence into their set, and like writhing and banging their head on the whatever various things. And it was a packed house, and everybody was like super into the set, and I was like, okay, this is cool, like maybe they'll like this, I like that. And we like get up on stage, and like somebody like starts warming up their guitar or whatever, and plays like a major 7th chord, and it's just like in mass the entire place just emptied, but nobody left. They all just went out to the front patio, literally everyone, and it was a full bar, and the only person that was left in the venue was the sound person. And we played our set to nobody for no money, and then we like had to do a loadout of shame past the entire bar that was still just hanging out front. And the sound guy was like, yeah, you guys are really good, but maybe you shouldn't play here. Maybe you should play somewhere else. And we're like, they just said yes. We just emailed them and asked if we could play. A lot of that kind of stuff happens on tour, where you just like, you take any show where you can get it and you hope for the best, and whatever happens, happens.
That's kind of been a struggle for Shy Boys over the years, because we've more or less been a DIY band by definition, but haven't ever really fit in with the DIY scene, if that makes sense. I think you think of DIY, it's like, punk or hardcore, things like that. And, we've played a lot of those shows, but have always kind of been outcasts. Not outcasts, but on the periphery. Yep. We've never really truly been a part of it. And so it's always been, especially for booking, like we'll play these shows and we just won't connect with anybody, because they're expecting a certain genre that, but we just didn't fit.
I mean, on the flip side, though, that a lot of times we had people watch our set and loved it that we totally expected would be dismissive or whatever, which those are some of my favorite shows, where you just show up and nobody knows anything about you, and they don't have any expectation, and you just play, and they're like, wow, that was sick, and they're like, okay, cool, I love you. Those are like some of my favorite shows too, when you just kind of like catch people off guard. usually, I'd say more often than not, people are pleasantly surprised and like put off by what we're doing, which is cool.
Yeah. I mean, here in Kansas City, like, we've always kind of been more in the underground, I guess, and we've always like played shows with, we play a lot of shows with like punk bands and hardcore bands, and you have a lot of friends in that scene, you know, who've always been very nice and very accepting of us, and like have allowed us to play on bills that we shouldn't really have been on, you know, as far as genre mixing. But I've always kind of, and this maybe it's just me, I've always just kind of felt uncomfortable because I know I don't really belong, you know, to whatever that scene is. But I know I definitely don't belong with, you know, the other side of it, you know, here in town.
Yeah.
So we've always been kind of caught in the middle in this weird, you know, saltwater brine kind of thing that we don't really belong anywhere and everywhere at the same time.
Has it ever been tossed out, like even like the idea of like moving to Chicago or Brooklyn or wherever, where like it would be a little easier to like get on a
Find
bill?
like-minded.
Yeah.
We've talked about it tons of times, but I think we were all just like pretty much too poor and didn't really want to have to like, you know, I like Kansas City in general, but it's pretty easy to make ends meet here, and it's pretty convenient as far as like, I have so many friends in other cities. There's like they have to drive 15 minutes to get to their practice space, and have to pay an extra rent for the space and work 50 hours a week just to make their own rent. It's like, I don't want to do all that.
Yeah.
You know, I just want to hang out and make music in
An old cheap house
Midwestern
with a Midwest
attitude.
basement,
Yeah,
you
I
know?
mean, I think there's a lot of pluses of being here. If you can get out and go on tour and present yourself to everyone else, I don't see, like, to me, Kansas City's the place to be.
But yeah, and another thing I wanted to ask about was, like, you guys talked about in, like, the pitch piece and, like, the Flatland piece that you were kind of, like, in a group, like, rut between the two albums. But, like, I do remember, like, you probably weren't playing a ton of shows, but, like, I do remember seeing you guys, like, at, like, I think the Mills show of, like, Middle of the Map, like, a few years ago, and also, like, at, like, a Rooftop Vigilantes, like, Blind Tiger show.
Yeah.
So, like, I was just kind of curious, like, you guys sounded great at those shows, but, like, was it tough to, like, kind of, like, pull yourselves up and, like, just keep playing those shows even when, like, things weren't really working with the band for a minute?
Oh yeah, I think it was a huge test for all of us to be able to sustain the project through the low points. And we were working on other albums too. Like Connor has his own band, and we spent maybe 6 or 9 months just solely focusing on that record. And so every once in a while, Shy Boys would play, but it's like we would practice maybe once or not at all and just play the set. 'Cause for whatever reason, we just like weren't really interested in forcing it. And then like, yeah, we lived together, we were in bands together, we worked together a lot. I think that we just like were around each other and experienced everybody's highs and lows very intimately. And I mean, at this point, I'm really proud that we're still together and like really close friends. And a lot of ways we grew up together, which is cool, but it's not always easy I think a classic Kansas City definitely, I think bands break up pretty regularly and just start a new one. But I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just because I think everyone's really talented, and that helps, like, because you want to just like keep doing it. You want to see what you can manage to make together. But there's also not very many people doing pop music, so we're also like stuck with each other.
Yeah.
And you mentioned like also in the pitch piece that like there was the idea of like having like a triple album thing where it was like a Ross album, a Shy Boys album, and like a Connor or a Kyle album.
Connor,
Yeah, so, but you'd also mentioned earlier that, like, the songwriting is very kind of like an equal-minded thing. Like, one person doesn't usually show up with, like, a whole song. So, like, was there, like, a change in, like, your guys' thought process over that? Or, I don't know. It sounds like a kind of conflicting.
We just kind of ended up, like, whoever has, like, the initial song idea for their, like, own project or whatever, everyone else kind of acts as, like, a support or, like, helping to shape whatever this song is or could be, and then it ends up on, like, that person's. But, like, Full Bloods or ACVs and Shy Boys, it's basically the same people, just, like, different principal, I guess, like, songwriter.
No, yeah, and you have been playing with Full Bloods lately. Like,
I've been playing with
joined-
them for a few years. I've been playing in the ACBs for a long time, even though they're, like, sort of a band, sort of just a recording project. And Collin's been in both bands for a while now, too. That's how, like, we really met each other, was, like, in 2007 and 6 or something like that. Collin and I had our, like, first band, and we would play with the ACBs, and because we were both doing pop at the time, too. We were, I mean, different variations, but we ended up playing a lot of shows together because, you know, there's just, like I said, not a ton of pop bands. So we became friends, and then here we are, like, 10 years later. So.
Yeah, and yeah, you guys have a couple upcoming, like, kind of short tours that you're doing. You're opening a few dates with Starfucker, and then, like, maybe 10 or so with Waves, like, in the fall. Like you said, you've kind of been paired up with, like, strange or, like, bands that are, like, louder than you guys a lot. So, like, what are you kind of expecting on these upcoming runs? I know you've played Fucker before.
We did maybe a week-long stretch with them a couple years ago. We're also going to do a couple weeks with Laluz in, like, October.
Unofficially.
It could happen. Who's to say?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see what happens, you know. At this point, we're just kind of like, you book us a tour, we'll do it. Doesn't really matter a whole lot who's the headliner. I think you just kind of take the opportunities as they come and hope that people will be into what you're doing. So, because we don't really have, like, you know, we're not like a hot ticket item, so it's not like we get to be like, no thanks. You know, we definitely are, like, stoked to get to play in front of bigger audiences that we could provide on our own. That's kind of how it works, you know. It's like when you're, I'd say, like, we're on the bottom level of the next level up from DIY or whatever, and so you're just kind of, like, spending time, like, touring a bunch and riding the coattails of other people's fame, and hope that the people that go to see it likes your stuff, and then will come see you in the future.
Did the Starfucker run a couple years ago go pretty well? Were you
it was
satisfied how that
it was
came out?
amazing.
It was a dream.
Yeah, we'd be playing, like, sold out every night, a couple thousand kids, and people who go to those shows are just, like, looking to have a good time and party. And we played a short and sweet 25-30-minute set, and you know, I think a large portion of our, like, social media followers came from people, like, seeing those shows. You can definitely tell, like, if you're in a band in Kansas City, you gotta go on tour, baby. It's the only way.
Those Starfucker dates and places where we get to play with, you know, other more established bands, it's just, especially the Starfucker dates were amazing because we'd show up with, like, we were 3-piece at the time, and they've got this huge setup with, like, you know, 6 keyboards and light show and all that stuff, and we're just coming up with, like, a guitar, bass, and drums, and we were singing. I mean, we were really good that tour, I gotta be real. And people just, like, loved us, and it was so easy because we were just using all of their gear too, pretty much. So we just walk on stage, basically, like, check our instruments and go, and they'd have, like, water and towels and like beer and like a nice veggie platter and like all kinds of these things. So we were just like reaping the benefits of the good life and not giving them anything back. You know, and people are excited to buy T-shirts and stuff because they're still getting allowances, and yes, it's great, and luckily the people like Starfucker or Cutworms or Mild High Club, like they're all just super chill, great people, and you know, I don't think we've played with anybody who hasn't actually liked our band either. So, I mean, it's been really nice.
Oh yeah, and you're all part of the, well, at least some of those bands are on Polyvinyl too, so it's a nice little family. It sounds like
starting to be, yeah.
And the Get Up Kids are on there now, so you got some more Kansas City folks.
That was they announced the signing Get Up Kids like the week before they announced us, and it was really strange. I mean, I never listened to the Get Up Kids growing up. I was never into like pop punk and stuff, but I know there's like a landmark local act, you know, so it's just really strange to be lumped in, you know, to the same label as they are.
So yeah, the next album's gonna be a pretty pop punk kind of.
Yeah, you know, we're kind of going to
that's good.
2003 emo thing. Yeah, that's the next phase for sure.
No, yeah, and I think that's about all I had. Do you guys have any plugs you want to throw out? Like, where should people get the album? What shows are you playing coming up, people?
Unfortunately, we don't have anything on the books locally, but the album's just kind of everywhere. You can take music streaming, or you know, you can buy it from the label, or you can buy it from us. You can knock on our door and come get it, which is great because then we can just pocket the cash rather than giving it directly to the label. Just Bell House is just all over the place. It's pretty hard to not stumble on it with all the stupid sponsored ads and things we've got going right now. So,
nice.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and y'all are on like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter too. So.
Yeah, Shy Boys.
No, you guys have a good
Instagram.
Twitter presence too. I don't know who's in charge of that, but
it's mostly Kyle Little now. Nice. He got a taste of the glory and has run with it. He's just like coming up all these. I think the last one he did was some pun about boiling eggs and the Eagles. I don't know. It was pretty silly.
His Twitter's good too.
He's
so.
he's the perfect person to run a show
he's
for
hilarious.
that. Yeah.
It's a good person to add to the band. Someone who excels at social media and.
Well, Kyle's just not to extend this whole thing, but bringing Kyle on board was a great way to bring us out of our funk. You know, because he came in right in the middle of it. And I think he said maybe in that pitch article or something.
It's like, oh man, the band's gonna break up.
It's like, I love the music, but I'm sad the band's gonna break up soon. You know, but he's just kind of a funny guy, and he can get dark too, so he can, you know, get with us on that. But he definitely brightened up the music making space when he came in.
Yeah,
just personality,
infectious laugh, and he enjoys laughing, which is awesome.
Yeah,
very clutch.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
But yeah, I appreciate you guys being on the show today. People can follow at Shuttlecock Mag on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can visit shuttlecockmusic.com for the articles, shuttlecockmag.bigcartel.com for t-shirts, photozines, and buttons. And look out for the shows we have booked coming up on our Facebook page. But yeah, thanks again for being here, guys.
Thank you,
man. It's been great.